So, first of all, let me just say I'm an excitable person. I can admit that, but I'm especially excited today. I am joined by two people that I have long admired, I have long respected, and have long. Well, I've had the great pleasure of having Zach on, but finally, I get to have the lovely, the talented, the amazing Keisha J. Kelly, who is founder and CEO of Black College Experience and Sports. And I get the chance to talk near and dear to my heart because I myself was a former, uh, not quite so successful student athlete. A successful student. I was a good student. Not so successful athlete. Shout out to my wrestling coach who took pity on me and let me hang around the team. The football team was not quite so charitable, but this is a great time of year. We get to hopefully spend time with our loved ones because the holidays are fast approaching. But Zach and I were just talking right before the show started, but it also means football season unbelievably is about to end. It feels like it just started. Savor, right? Sop it up like you would all that cornbread dressing and gravy that you'll soon be sopping up as we wind down the football season. And we talk football all the time here on College Football Forecast, but I get to talk about HBCU football today. We'll touch on the other stuff, but I want to spend most of today digging deep into HBCU football, which gets discussed, but not discussed enough. So I will start by introducing right there. You'll see that lovely gentleman with the amazing background and the camouflaged hairline, my friend, my compatriot, Mr. and Master Gunnery Sergeant Greg Rector. How are we doing, Greg?
I'm doing very well, Bill. I hate to disappoint your cadets tomorrow, but Notre Dame is going to crush those cadets of yours. You get your revenge in December when you get to beat up my Navy midshipmen, but
see, I'm not disputing that Notre Dame will win, but you use the word crush. I don't know what kind of person you are, but if you're a betting person, look at that look at that point spread. I just have a feeling
the point spread is high.
I have a feeling the Black Knights of the Hudson may allow you to invest football-wise in something that might bring you back a return on your investment. And then maybe beneath me on your screen, but above me in so many ways, once again, the amazing Miss Keisha Kelly. How are we doing this evening?
All is well. Busy, but all is very well. Very well.
That is what I love to hear. And I'm going to go to our anchor person, right? A person who is, once again, very dear to my heart. I met this gentleman not even knowing I was going to meet him, and then he has become one of my favorite human beings, as well as my favorite people to talk football with. Zach McKinnell, who has been, I think, one of the most solid and dependable people and one of the most knowledgeable people when it comes to talking ball. How's everything going, Zach?
Man, good. Like Miss Keisha said, it's real busy, man. It's picking up, and I think staying busy is why this season feels like it's been like 24 hours long. Man, we got the SWAC championship coming up, FCS playoffs coming up, man. So draft stuff's coming up, which I know we're going to talk about tonight. So just appreciate you having me again.
Well, how could I not? So I'm not going to spend too much time just yapping in general when we can yap specific. So you just brought some things up. I'm old enough to remember when all the HBCU teams played at HBCU conferences, right? And now that is no longer the case. And that is, I'm torn, right? As a traditionalist and as a person who went to Norfolk State, I miss some of our old rivalries. I'm old enough to remember when we were in the CIAA. That's how old I am. And then we made the transition to FCS, and with it, the transition to the MEAC. And to me, that felt like all is right with the world, all is good. We sort of outgrew, no offense to the CIAA, but we sort of outgrew the CIAA a little bit. And it felt more natural. And I thought, oh, this is it. This is the world, from now until forever. And now, at one point, we weren't sure the MEAC was going to survive, which thankfully, knock on wood, it has. But I'm going to start with ladies first. I'm going to start with Ms. Kelly. Tell me about your impressions of the season thus far, what you think will be happening in terms of, once again, the survival of HBCU conferences going forward, and then we can start talking about the other fun stuff that Zach just brought up in a moment.
So, me personally, first of all, shout out to Southern University, A&M College, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the school that made me who I am. Much love, much respect, all debt owed to that university. Being a Southern University Jaguar, I tell people all the time, though, even though I'm Southern University made, I am not, I'm very critical of my university. I'm critical of all universities, all of their athletic programs. And I'm going to always have whatever it is I'm going to say it about my university like I say about any other university. This has been a very interesting season per se. And so we can go across the board, across all conferences. It's been very interesting to say the least. And I don't, going into the season, being at SWAC Media Day, I remember getting the where they thought that Southern would finish. They placed Southern at number 4. And so fast forward to now, we see that last week Southern clinched the West. And so we can look back and we can laugh and say, okay, well, this is what people voted on. Jackson State wasn't voted to go first. And we see where they came out in the East. And so I heard someone say, we were talking about how Coach Graves and how we keep finishing in these multiple overtimes. And it was said to me because I was like, that's just not good play. And then I didn't look at it in the way that they said. They said, if you do it once, it's luck. If you keep doing it and you find a way to win the game, it's now become a skill. And so that's what I've adopted. And as excited as everyone is to rush the SWAC championship, I've also adopted the mantra that Coach Graves has, the same one that Coach Berry has. Go 1-0. You play the next game that's on your schedule. And I tell people I've been around this a lot longer than most people. I've been around this almost 20 years. So I was doing it before it was sexy, before it was a fad, before everybody came around. I've watched so many teams and so many conferences. As far as the MEAC, I've followed the MEAC for a while. Of course, we all know when North Carolina A&T was dominating, call it what it is. Nobody else was coming out of there for Celebration Bowl, really, but North Carolina A&T until Central came out. So most of that time, it was going to be North Carolina A&T. That's how dominant it was. And happy that conference did not collapse, because there was a time where we just did not think that it would survive. But thank God it did survive. It's just right now you still got teams over there that's thriving. You got South Carolina State that's under Chennis Berry that's thriving. You got North Carolina Central under Coach Trey Oliver that's thriving. Stout defense over with Morgan State. So, you still got Coach Odoms that's over there with Norfolk State. So great football on the SWAC and the MEAC side, but we just can't completely rule out the SIAC and the CIAA when you start talking about Virginia Union and Virginia State, even Winston-Salem. When we come over here to the SIAC, you look at Coach Teddy Keaton that's taking a 0-10 team to the championship his first year. We look back at his career from Stillman up until from Stillman to Allen up into this time over here right now at Clark Atlanta. And unfortunately, they couldn't get it done last week in the SIAC championship, and Coach Shea did win with Miles. But all of these conferences, if you pay attention to each of them, they have something different that they offer. And they're going from, there's more eyes being turned on these conferences. But, where I think this is going, I think it's going to be more eyes, more people tuning in. You have so many media companies that is now tuning in to cover these HBCU athletics, which is the thing that you always wanted. And so I think that it's just going to continue to grow. No matter what the sport is, it's going to continue to grow. I know everybody's always tuned in to football. That's the thing everybody's, most aligned with. But I do, it's not a flex. I champion myself on being able to cover all athletics, not just football, because every student athlete has their own thing. Every student athlete, in my opinion, matters. So it goes beyond football. Football ends, you go into the next sport. And so you have to just carry that mantra on so the eyes continue to be on whatever sport it is that's going on.
Yep, I could not agree with you more. I'm going to jump down to my friend Zach. So, Mr. McKinnell, same question to you. The sort of taking the pulse of HBCU football and where you see where it is, where you think it's going, and once again, the question of uh, the cost benefit analysis, I guess, of the cross pollination now of HBCUs now branching out and leaving their traditional homes in terms of conferences.
Wait, before you answer, Zach, I'm
Oh,
sorry. I went a little bit too long, so I ain't know. I ain't know who's gonna have the same question. My bad.
you know what?
There
My
is
bad, Zach.
there is
It's
nothing nothing wrong with the length of time you took, Keisha,
correct.
at all.
No.
Because it was all
My bad.
straight,
I ain't
it
know.
was all straight platinum, not even gold. It was straight platinum. It was untouchable. You couldn't,
I'm
a
sorry,
cat couldn't
Zach.
scratch it. It was pure, unalloyed perfection. Never
Yeah.
apologize for
I'm
dropping
sorry.
diamonds just like that. Mr. McKinnell, I
No.
apologize you having to follow such an amazing
Right.
entree, but here we go. If anyone can do it, you can. Same question to you.
No, I mean, I kind of agree with everything you said. I mean, I'll start in the MEAC. I think Chinnis Berry and what he's done at South Carolina State is not being talked about enough, just because I understand how historic Buddy Pugh is in terms of that program's history and legacy, but let's not forget that team last year really struggled and lost a lot of pieces defensively, specifically the defensive line, where I think their whole defensive line may have been at the Legacy Bowl last year with Jaworski Green and those guys. And to replace them and have two guys rank among top 10 nationally in sacks this year, and I want to say top 25 in tackles for loss is amazing. Then you got a guy in Aaron Smith who is going to the Shrine Bowl as well at linebacker. The secondaries come along. For me, the biggest question mark was defense, and their defense has lived up to the hype and more. And for a guy like Eric Phoenix to take the route that he did, where he was winning championships at Benedict, he goes to Murray State. He just gets caught behind a guy who's just in a different stratosphere, in DJ Williams, who's now at Southern Illinois and was leading them to top 10 wins before he got hurt. For him to come back to HBCU football and get to South Carolina State and help Chinnis Berry win the MEAC in his first season, his story is amazing. I mean, he's a great guy as well. I've had him on the show. I know his family, man. I love the fact that they got that done. Running game's been there. And then talk about the wide receivers, man. That's something that since Shaq left South Carolina State, their receiving core hasn't had a true superstar. When you look at Caden High and all the Justin Brown Smith that they all brought back, they are future superstars. Caden High is one of my favorite players to watch right now. And we already knew what that offensive line was going to be. And you mix that with Trey Oliver's personality, the way his team plays. Jamari Taylor almost makes you forget they lost Mookie Collier this offseason, who was one of the MVPs of the Celebration Bowl win. And here comes Walker Harris as one of the next star quarterbacks for North Carolina Central. Defensively, they took a step forward, and you look at what Morgan State's doing defensively, and it all starts with a guy with Elijah Williams, who I'm sure we're going to talk about later when we get to the NFL draft portion of this. But I think he's probably been one of the top 5 most dominant players, not just in HBCU football, but in FCS football in general. So I think the MEAC is doing their thing, man. I'll say this, with the teams leaving and going and playing in different, or playing in PWI conferences, I don't see anyone else leaving, to be honest with you. I think that's kind of a moot point. You got to think Tennessee State has never been really an HBCU conference. They've always been in the OVC, Big South OVC, so they've always kind of been on their own. And I think A&T and Hampton wanted to make that jump and see if it could lead to potentially an FBS invite. It just hasn't worked out particularly that way. And so we'll see what they do in the future. I know there's been some rumors about them coming back and making some changes. We'll see. I'm not going to speculate on that. But for the SWAC, I think Jackson was kind of an obvious one. That's who I picked to win the East this year. They just had all the boxes checked in the preseason, from offensive line to Jacoby and Morgan coming back. We knew what Irv Mulligan was. Wide receiver has some question marks, but Jonas Fortillion and those guys have really developed well. Defensively, promoting Quinn to defensive coordinator was a massive move by TC, and you see it's paid dividends in terms of their front 7 development, which was really lacking last year. And that was kind of the last box they needed to check after that 7-win season. I think we all kind of saw FAM take that step back just because of everything that they lost. But I do want to give a shout out here to Southern, man. That was a team who I really didn't believe in, to be honest with you. When I look at what they were bringing back, I do think you have to give Terrence Graven that staff, and Miss Keisha can tell you there was a lot of jokes about the age of that staff, and they don't have enough young coaches, and they don't have this. That experience is the reason that they're going to be in the SWAC championship this year. Because when you look at how that team has evolved from even that Nichols loss to how it has evolved throughout conference play, they have slowly just tweaked and tinkered with it and made changes and benched players and brought people in the starting lineup and made that team what it is. The defining moment of the season was Terrence Graves and that offensive staff making the change to the offensive line and making the change at quarterback. And you've seen that offense reach a whole new level. And then Shelby Gibbons at defensive end is just an absolute monster. He leads CFCS in tackles for loss again. I think it's like 24 and a half right now with still a game left against Grambling. So give Terrence Graven that staff credit. And then another one that slipped under the radar, I believe, is Alcorn. The reason that slipped under the radar is they were predicted to win the West, even with the first-year head coach who said, Thomas, guys, they have a chance to win 7 games this weekend in year 1, which is always a huge deal. So I think Alcorn deserves a little bit of credit, especially with the uncertainty at quarterback they've had. We knew the defense was going to be good, but I think they were only returning 2 offensive starters, and for them to still maybe get to 7 wins is super impressive. And I think the story of the year in HBCU football, we haven't talked about them yet, is Tennessee State. They have a chance this weekend with a win over SEMO to solidify their place in the FCS playoffs. And depending on how UT Martin and Tennessee Tech look this weekend, if both of those teams lose, they win the Big South OVC in a 2-way tiebreaker with SEMO and get the auto bid. If they win this weekend, they win their first, or I would say a share of a conference title since 1999. I was 3 years old in 1999. It's been a long time. So I want to give a huge shout out to Eddie George and that staff, because you see that they keep building and building, and they would just always fall short in November. They have a chance this weekend to make some history, and I'm really, really hoping they pull it off.
Yeah, one of the old sayings is the games they remember are played in November, right? That you hear that, from the time you're 8, 9 years old onward. So I do want to talk a little bit about the upcoming game. So I'll stick with you for a moment, Zach, and then I'll move over to the amazing Miss Kelly. This is going to be a big weekend, right? A lot is about to be decided. Walk me through your analysis of the games of this coming weekend.
It's interesting because the SWAC and MEAC are locked up this weekend. So I think it's more so just getting these rivalry games out of the way. And also, too, I think there's some coaches potentially coaching for extensions, coaching to keep their seat cool throughout the offseason. But I look at the Jackson Alcorn game. It's just a game of momentum, right? And that's a game that both fan bases want to win regardless of the stakes. And I think that Jackson Alcorn matchup is interesting, especially in terms of just pure X's and O's with Jackson's offense and what they like to do and what Alcorn does well defensively. Are they going to be able to block up that front four with Malachi Bailey and some of that defensive talent? You got Stamarian Edwards and those guys at linebacker as well. Is Jackson able to run the football? They faced a really good Alabama State defense last weekend, probably had their worst offensive performance in probably the past 2 or 3 seasons, still found a way to win. Can they take that into the reservation? And if your coach said you want to get the 7 wins, and a win over Jackson would propel that program into 2025 with a whole lot of momentum after a 7-win season year 1. And then I think the game of the week, in my opinion, is that SEMO Tennessee State game. You look at Draylon Ellis's trajectory. He comes out firing at Austin Peay, wins the OVC Freshman of the Year, and was the preseason Player of the Year. His tenure goes poorly there. He enters the transfer portal, gets to Tennessee State, and he's been a little bit up and down. He's probably had the best statistical year of his career this year. And Tennessee State defensively has been really good under defensive coordinator Brandon Fisher. But guys, they're playing without, I think, 7 starters in the front 7. And they're still winning games and have a chance to get to 9 wins this season. SEMO's been extremely one-dimensional. They've struggled to run the football due to injuries at running back, and also losing a guy like Geno Hess, who is their all-time leading rusher, really took a toll. If Tennessee State makes them one-dimensional, it can force Paxton DeLaurent into making some mistakes. Tennessee State has a massive, massive chance to pull this one off, especially with how balanced their offense can be. They allowed 21 points in the first quarter against UT Martin 2 weeks ago, shut them out the rest of the game defensively outside of a fluke touchdown. And they threw 3 picks in the red zone in the second half in that game. So they should be controlling their own destiny in that game. I was at that one. It was just, there was just so many just shot themselves in the foot moments. And so I think that game's the game of the week, the game with the most implications. But that Jackson Alcorn game is on my radar, is probably the next biggest games in HBCU football this weekend.
Okay, excellent. So we've talked big picture, right? Now we're sort of narrowing. I'm going to jump back over to Ms. Kelly. Walk me through what you'll be watching this week and why.
Well, of course, everybody's going to be locked into Soul Bowl. Of course, you can't look over Jackson State and Alcorn, but you cannot forget about Florida Classic. We cannot forget about FAMU and Bethune-Cookman. It's another storied rival. After both of them coming off losses, especially FAMU, I think Coach Cozy, after talking to them on Monday on SWAC Coaches Call, I think they're very anxious to get back out there and, try to get in the win column. And I think after, taking that loss to Mississippi Valley, which most people, if not everybody, did not expect, I think they're very anxious to see what's going to happen there. Another game that I'm going to be locked into, Alabama State Prairie View. Just Alabama State. I had a chance to get to Montgomery last week and do some coverage there. And, as Zach stated, one of the top defenses, and they really contained Irv Mulligan last week. So I'm really interested to see what this Alabama State team is going to do tomorrow. And I think they do. I think they play complete football, but they have to find a way to actually execute and close out these games. But it will be interesting to see what they do tomorrow against Prairie View. And then we'll get ready for the following week.
Makes sense. Get ready for the next week. So we started out like way up here, right? And then we moved down to like first floor level. And now we're going to start digging deep. We're going to go down like deep into the sub basement soon enough. You mentioned a lot about, both of you, about contrasting styles, right? You have some teams that want to just punch you in the face, knee you, lean on you, elbow you in the eye. And you have some teams that play pretty ball, right? Where, you've got wide receivers streaking down the field, quarterback run game, quarterback on the move, and then, pop passes over your head when you come up to try to stop the quarterback run game. There's a lot of different ways to get it done on offense. And we mentioned, obviously, people like Shelby Gibbons and of course, Mr. Elijah Williams, who are, when we get to the draft segment, as mentioned, we'll definitely talk about them. And obviously, the Senior Bowl has already invited Mr. Vincent, and deservedly invited him. But HBCU football, as you mentioned, was a fad for a year and a half, right? Everybody suddenly started busting out HBCU gear. And we now see more and more ways HBCU Go and a few other things are now coming about. So the future of HBCU football, in my mind, is secured in the sense of it's not going to go away, right? We won't see all of the traditional HBCU conferences dissolve, right? I think we all are in agreement they're going to survive. Looking at the playing field, for lack of a way of putting it, I'll start with Ms. Kelly. So the big things that people often talk about is, one, coaching talent, right? Mm-hmm. The coaching talent, we talked about legends. We had some legends retire not too long ago. But we see some young coaches, some up and comers. We talk about players who are truly talented and on the rise. Tell me about the coaches, and they don't have to be head coaches. This could be recruit coordinators that you're excited about their futures in HBCU football.
Okay, so before I start, y'all, I really don't want to do this, but I'm going to have to. His name is Kelby. I'm sorry. Yes. His name is Kelby. Yes. I just had to tell y'all that's his name is Kelby.
Kelby, right?
It's Kelby. Yes. So no, anyhow, when you start talking about coaches, you talk about young coaches. I look back at some of the coaches that I've actually watched play, and now I'm watching them actually coach. Two of them are at Jackson State. So you have a Coach James that I watched play at Tuskegee under Coach Slater. Now I'm watching this kid or young man actually coach at Jackson State. I remember when Javancy Jones was playing for Jackson State. I remember interviewing Javancy Jones. Now you look at Javancy coaching at Jackson State. I remember watching Quentin Burrell play in arena football, which is Eddie Robinson's great grandson. I remember him meeting him years ago, almost 20 years ago, playing arena football. Then he went on to coach at Grambling. Now he's at Southern. So you see all of these new coaches that are coming in, different coaches that I know over at Morehouse, coaches over at Clark Atlanta, all of these coaches that are actually getting a chance to be position coaches, no matter what it is that they're coaching, they're actually coming in and they're doing great jobs coaching these kids, and they're building young men every single time. And so what happens from that when they actually branch from our HBCUs, you see coaches like Coach KJ that was a standout at a standout at Prairie View, that went on to coach also at FAMU. And so now what we see is that, he's being honored at Prairie View. He's gone through like the fellowship program. Now he's here in Atlanta with the Falcons. So you see these coaches that are able to maneuver around. They can start at our HBCUs and they just branch out and they just grow. They've gone through so many different places, but I think it's really good that, we see them. They start out as position coaches. They could end up as head coaches, but I think it's great that they get the shot, whether it's at their alma mater or it's at another school. And I'm always two-sided. I'm always happy to see, them get the shot, but we know the better they do, the more people are going to come calling and knocking. So, you love to see them succeed, but you hate to see them go. But in hindsight, I think it's really good that these coaches actually get the opportunity to go back and do what they love, and that's to coach and pour back into the young men, like so important to them.
Right. And Zach, you just mentioned, of course, a sort of famous name, Brandon Fisher. I have a feeling he will not be long for Tennessee. I could be wrong, but I don't think he's long for Tennessee State.
No, that's my guy, and he's going to be a head coach sooner rather than later.
Yep. So same question to you. Tell me about some of the non-playing talent that you're excited about in HBCU football.
I mean, outside of Coach Fisher, I mean, I look at North Carolina Central. I mean, offensive coordinator Matt Leone. I mean, it's almost overdue that he's gotten a shot somewhere as a head coach. What he did developing Davius Richard, what he's done with Walker Harris, what he's done with Mookie Collier, what he's done with all this offensive talent, and he calls the plays. As much as Trey Oliver is a guy who can influence that team, Matt Leone conducts that offense. But some of the calls that he made at the Celebration Bowl, those trick plays and reverses and schemes that gave Jackson a lot of trouble, Leone drew that up, and he's been a coach that's had success everywhere he's went. Even his time at Southern, he was successful as well. So that's a guy I'll look for to get a job. And let's stay at Central. Courtney Cord and what he's done defensively with North Carolina Central, where he's even had an NFL fellowship, I want to say, with the Jaguars, I believe it was. So both those coaches will be on my list. Ryan Lewis as well, defensive coordinator at Alabama State. We talk about every year how good that defense has been for Alabama State, and his I would say his focus position is linebackers. Should we start listing the linebackers that have come out of that system, from Colton Adams to Rico Dozier from UAPB there now, DeMarcus Cunningham, the list goes on and on. He has developed some outstanding talent and has led one of the top defenses. I believe they're number one in the SWAC right now. And let's just be honest, they don't have the help of a good offense. They have to do above and beyond. Can you imagine how good that defense would be if they weren't out there for like 85 snaps a game if their offense can move the ball? So let's give Ryan Lewis a lot of credit for what he's done there. And then another one, he's new to the SWAC, but he played at PV as well. Anthony Whedon, first year OC over there at Prairie View, did what he did at Campbell, where he was called, I believe he earned the Play Caller of the Year award in the CAA, has plenty of success dating back to Presbyterian non-scholarship school, where he had freshman of the years and helped develop quarterbacks. He helped develop Hajj Malik Williams, who's now at UNLV doing what he's doing, leading UNLV into the top 25. So those would be the names on my list that are up and coming coaches in the HBCU ranks that are leaders, position coaches that deserve headshots.
I cannot agree more with every single thing that both of you said. Makes me feel smart that I booked you two. So I love everything that you mentioned there, and I'm excited. I am excited about the future. And where once I was nervous about it, I'm now excited about it. I want to talk about Division II and FCS playoffs. And for a long time, these were things that were sometimes downplayed at HBCUs. And of course, for those that are super old, like Greg and I,
Thank you for reminding everybody how old I am again, Bill. Thank you very
but,
much.
but back before even they call it FCS, back when it was still the Division I AA, when they first had a championship game, right, it was won by FAM. Florida A&M won the initial one, and there has not been an HBCU team that's even made it deep really into the playoffs since. So I am hoping that will change. I will stick with you for the moment, Zach, and then I'll throw it to Miss Kelly. Is there an HBCU team that you see now or in the near future can make a deep run in either Division II or FCS playoffs?
I mean, I think D2 would probably be the area. I mean, because I think most recently, I believe it was Winston-Salem State. I don't remember what year it was, but they were the last school that really, really made a run. I mean, I'll be interested to see what Miles does this year, possibly in the D2 playoffs. But I think D2 is your best shot just because the two D2 conferences send their champions, right? I find it very hard that the second place team out of the SWAC East or the SWAC West, and it's mostly the SWAC East, just because you look at the West, I would say 8 out of 10 years, the second place team is Southern and Grambling, and they're not eligible, right, to go because of the Bayou Classic. So I just find it hard that the second or third place team in the SWAC East is going to be able to make a deep run. I think a win might be possible, but depending on the matchup, like when you look back at Tennessee State's last FCS playoff when it was in 2013 and they got paired with a non-scholarship school, it wasn't even competitive. And then they went to the second round. I believe they lost to like Eastern Illinois or someone like that back in 2013.
Correct.
I would think the HBCUs that have the best shot to go deep in the playoffs would be one of the ones not in the HBCU conference. You look at like Tennessee State this year. You look at A&T or Hampton if they can build their programs up and get to that level. But it's just going to be hard to argue that the second, it would really be the third place team in the SWAC or the second place team in the MEAC can make a deep run. I thought Central had the potential, but I think all of us on this panel know as soon as Davius Richard gets hurt, the conversation changed completely. If he's 100% healthy, I think they beat Richmond. Do they go to the next round? And I believe the next round they would have had, I want to say UAlbany, who made a semifinal run last year. Do they beat UAlbany on the road? I don't know, but I do think that game would have been competitive with the talent they had. So I think it would go D2 best chance, non-HBCU conference HBCUs, and then probably the MEAC, and then the SWAC would probably be in the back end just because the SWAC's going to send someone who, probably isn't competing for the conference title.
Right.
Yep. Same question, Miss Kelly.
Listen, now that's hard to follow. That's hard to follow because I think he's absolutely accurate. He's spot on. As far as I would say Tennessee State definitely. To add to it, I would probably throw either Virginia. I would throw Virginia Union in there. That's who I would probably throw in. Maybe I would say they would probably get past maybe that first round, maybe to the second. But I completely echo everything that he says. And just like he said because of Bayou Classic, Southern or Grambling does not have that opportunity. So yeah, I feel the same way. Definitely about the HBCUs, like how deep they would actually go in the rounds of the playoffs.
Yeah, it's long bothered me, though I understand it from the financial standpoint and traditional standpoint, everything like that. But I've always wanted to see, again, that chance for an HBCU to make a deep run, to make to be an actual threat in the Division II and or FCS playoff season. Greg, I have been asking all the questions like a big old hog. I'm going to open it up. Should you have any questions, Greg? This is an excellent time to ask.
Well, yeah. Miss Keisha, your Southern Jaguars put a pounding on my Arkansas Pine Bluff guys last week. So, congratulations on that.
Thank
you. You're really upset Teron Armstead out there in Miami because he's the Pine Bluff man in the NFL these days. But you got a game against Grambling next week. And I hate to tell you, Jeff Barnes, my co-host on The Last Word was a former Grambling student. I still got your Southern Jaguars putting up hurting on Grambling next week. That's it's not going to be pretty. In other words, do you agree with me on that?
I do. And because it is the next game that's on the schedule, we just go like that. And so, it's a rival. I normally keep everything neutral in every game that I'm covering. But this year I got a shirt design. I can't wait to wear that shirt. So they're gonna be mad at me, but it's okay. Grambling is gonna get it this year. And so we do, it's always a good time. I'll head to New Orleans on Friday, but it's always a great time. But I have no doubt they're going to play us hard. Now, I'm not going to just say they're going to lay down. They're going to play us hard. But ultimately, I do believe that the Jaguars are going to walk away with the victory because, of course, when we talk about Coach Terrence Graves, he's the only coach that has been the winner on both sides for both Southern and Grambling. He's been the coach that's won Bayou Classic for both Southern and Grambling. So, we hope we get to catapult and brag a little bit more and say a little bit more to our country cousins on Exit 81. But they absolutely, they don't like us. We don't like them. But it's all love because I have so many friends that went to Grambling. They have so many friends that went to Southern. And then, of course, people from Louisiana, they had most of them, their family members are split. But unfortunately, in my family, nobody else went to I was the Southern grad. My twin sister was Alabama A&M. My nephew was Tennessee State. So we just kind of go across the board. But yeah, we're definitely ready to get in the dome for the 51st Bayou Classic and beat up on Grambling. We're ready.
Absolutely right. My other question here for both of you is the it's going to go towards the NFL draft. Mr. Bill Carroll and I in 2022 were correct in saying that 4 HBCU kids would be drafted. We were correct. But since then, we've also been very correct that no kids from the HBCU are getting drafted. The Dallas Cowboys, a team I cheer for, of course, signed Marquise Bell, thankfully. Unfortunately, he's now injured. But how many kids do you actually see being drafted by an NFL team this year that went to an HBCU? Go ahead first, Zach.
That's such a tough question. Just
it is.
Oh man, it is. In November is crazy. Okay, so just kind of going through my head, I think I'll give a range. I think it's going to be probably. I think 1 to 3 is probably the range I would put on it. Yeah. I think Elijah Williams is probably the strongest candidate right now to get drafted, just based on his versatility, the position he plays, how dominant he's been every single year. And I think he's going to be the type of guy who's going to go to a Senior Bowl, a Shrine Bowl, and a Legacy Bowl, a Combine, wherever he may go. And he's going to just jump off the page, and he's going to go to one of these games, and there's going to be a guy with a Power 5 logo on the other side who isn't expecting what he's going to get in that one-on-one drill, and he's going to just shine because he is a freak of nature. And I will bang the table that Elijah Williams is a potential guy who could make the 53-man roster, not just a practice squad guy. Like, this guy could be playing on the field next year. I think Carson Vincent has a pretty good shot. And then I think you'll get, a late bloomer somewhere kind of thrown in there. But I find it hard to just throw out like the 5 or 6 number, just because, you're talking about on average anywhere from like 8 to 16-ish. Sometimes I think the max is maybe like 20 FCS guys. So it's real hard to see anything more than that. And just because I look at the group of prospects, I think the highest I can see, if I had to put like an absolute max on it, where it's like, just no logic here, I think 5 is probably the max you're going to get. But I would say somewhere around that 3 mark is where I would go.
Same question for you, Miss Kelly.
And he did. I was looking at O lineman from Alabama A&M. Same thing with Carson Vincent. He said 1 to 3. I'm gonna go a little bit lower. I'm gonna say 2. I say there will definitely be some that will, make the practice squad. definitely going undrafted, unfortunately. But I think definitely on a draft, I definitely think at least one. I will add that I think as the Senior Bowl reveals or they continue to invite, we might see more guys that we might, it might be more draftable. But right now, I'm going to go with at least one. I'm going to go with one, definitely.
Okay, and then for both of you, then, which position is the strongest position in the HBCU class? Because of course, this year in the NFL draft, we're looking at a much lower tackle rate. We're looking at a much lower. The quarterbacks, I don't like any of them in the first round. I really don't. So in the HBCU class, which guys do you think have the positional advantage this year?
I'm gonna say you say D line. I'm gonna probably say probably D line.
Yeah, I'll co-sign that.
Yeah, I think D line. I'm not going. Oh, I'm gonna go D line. My opinion. I'm going D line over here on this side.
Okay. What about you, Zach?
Yeah, I would say D line or O line would probably be the case. I mean, historically, you kind of look at the positions that HBCU players have done well at, and been drafted at as D line, O line. I think DB you could throw in there. You get like a James Burgess, a Kenny Gallup, potentially, but I think D line would be my number one pick. I just think just because Elijah Williams is so good, it kind of brings up the group as a whole.
As a whole, right? Yeah. And you're making us two old guys who played defense for all of our lives very happy when you say this, because football is a team sport. It's not just about the damn quarterback.
Thank you so much, Greg. Thank you so much for that public service announcement. The fact is that you have seen the way the NFL views HBCU players change, and sadly not for the better. And once again, I'm going to bring up the fact that I remember the year. I will never forget the year that Hampton had more players to the combine than USC did, right? And I remember thinking in that moment, as I sort of, watched Alonzo Coleman and that whole group there, in Indianapolis, I thought to myself, I'll probably never see this again, right? I remember being excited, but also sort of sadly thinking I might never see this again. And of course, sadly, I've been right. I'll start with you, Zach. What do you think it would take for this to change, for the NFL to? I know we can't go. It's not going. We can't go back to 1969, 1974, whatever, where because of, well, frankly, racial segregation, you didn't see the great preponderance of black talent in the South go to any place but HBCUs. And obviously, I don't want us to go back to that. I am not saying bring that back. But what would it take for, because I mean, once again, just bring up things that I'll never forget. I remember also the year that every single NFL scout left within a few minutes of going to Jackson State's Pro Day. Now that hopefully will never happen again also, but what do you think it will take for most, not all, but at least most NFL teams making a stronger commitment to fairly evaluating HBCU talent?
I think it's a conversation that not a lot of people are ready for, because until you get people in the room who are going to fight for these players, nothing else you do really matters. Because if the people who are overall making the decisions don't care, then it doesn't matter how many scouts you send, doesn't matter how much promotion you do of your player or anything like that. If the people in the room who are making the decisions and have the influence to make the decisions aren't banging the table for those players, nothing's going to change. And that's the sad truth. And that's something that the more time I've spent, because, listen, I did the All-Star Tour the past 2 years where I went to the Legacy Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl, talked to scouts, talked to GMs on the field. Like, it's a mindset. And then also, too, it's just the infatuation with certain brands. Let's just be honest. They're going to see, if you took Kenny Gallup and slapped the Texas logo on him, man, he might be a day 2 pick.
Right.
And that's the sad truth of it. And the other thing is, I mean, I don't know if it's even just an HBCU issue. I mean, FCS guys, like the whole FCS is trending downwards. And there's this conversation about how do you fix it. I think the problem is going to get worse before it gets fixed. The transfer portal is going to do a number. And we're going to get to the point where we see players who used to play at Jackson, at Alabama A&M, who get drafted. You look at the Tank Dells. You look at Shador and Travis are going to get drafted this year. Was it Kevin Coleman, who was at Jackson, is probably going to get drafted out of, I believe it was Mississippi State in 2 years. So I think that's what you're going to see more of. And at the end of the day, man, the biggest thing I ask for is for the media in the HBCU and FCS space. We all have to do a better job of banging the table, promoting the players, and also too committing ourselves to either us getting in the room and getting in the ear of someone with some influence, or having someone get in the room and get in those positions. Because until we're in those draft meetings, until we're in the all-star game meetings where the senior and Shrine Bowl have to have HBCU FCS representation in the room, or it's just going to be a Power Five, hey, well, we got 3 spots for FCS guys, let's just invite these 3 FCS guys or HBCU guys and just keep it pushing for inclusion. And so I think that's going to be the thing, is getting the people in the room and getting some real influence in where these decisions are made.
Yeah, I this is the time of year where I do bother Jim Nagy. Sorry, Jim, but I bother you around this time every year, and he just has to get used to it. But maybe he has already. But I remember years where I would see guys that weren't even starters at fill in the name brand institution. What did I even starters? This guy's a rotational guy. He's a guy that plays 40% of the snaps, getting in over a dominant player. Yeah, from not just HBCU, but you said FCS as a whole, or Division II as a whole, guys who are dominant, record setters. How is a guy who's broken all these records not able to at least get the shot that a guy who couldn't start at his okay. Yeah. Whole other show at some point will be about that, and I will give vent to all of those things I'm thinking. Same question to you, Miss Kelly. What would it take to fix this so that players who are flat out killing it are not taking a backseat to guys who can't even start?
And so I think in this case that we have to continue. There always pick 2 people that I say are drum majors, and then a third one. So we know we have Doug Williams, we have Shaq Harris. Those are our 2 drum majors for HBCUs. Doug is our seat at the table. Every single time, Doug is going to go to bat for us. James Shaq Harris is going to go to bat for us. These are the guys that are at the table. But much like Zach said, we have to have those people that are in the room. You can send as many as scouts. You can send whomever you want to. But until, like he said, we have those people that are in the room making the decisions, those that are standing up for us saying, hey, give these guys a shot. Because we know what they can do. We see what they can do. We know in the HBCU landscape what can happen. And I always like to use Tariq Cohen from North Carolina A&T when he was drafted 4th round to the Chicago Bears. We knew about Tariq Cohen, but the rest of the world did not know about Tariq Cohen. And so you have somebody that breaks out, gets out there. Now everybody's in love with the guy. And we're like, well, we were telling y'all that. And then you have people in media like Steve Weish that's always using his platform, no matter where he is, to talk about these athletes from HBCUs, to purposely interview these athletes when they come into those spaces. And so, like Zach said, we have to do a better job. And one of the things I always like to say, we have to not only do a better job in covering them, but we have to be intentional. We got to cover more than one program. Just because a program is winning does not mean that you got to leave the rest of them dormant. I don't care if somebody going 0-10, you still got to talk about that school just as much as you're talking about a school that's winning the East, that's winning the West. We have to talk about all of these programs, because quiet is kept. It's a student athlete on each of these teams that's doing something that person hasn't even talked about. It's some players on University of Arkansas Pine Bluff team that people haven't even talked about. It's some record breakers that people aren't talking about. So we have to talk about all of these, and we have to be intentional about covering all of these stories, all of these schools, going to not just the games that are big games, the bowl games, the games that we feel like are very important, but continue to tell the story of everybody's, because we don't know who's going to look at our stories. We don't know who's following us. We don't know who's going to pick up on it, carry it, and say, oh, hey, yeah, you know what? Zach talked about that 10 years ago. We should have been watching this kid play 10 years ago. Boom, this person comes out, has a breakout season, and it's like, oh, okay, well, I told you so. So I think he did say we need to just do a better job, and we just have to have those people that have the most influence in the room every single time.
Could not agree more.
Can you tell us the UAPB players that are setting the records currently?
Why? Because that's your team.
Well,
Is that because it's your team?
Listen, I lived in Little Rock for 20 years, and UAPB was my team to go and see because, of course, the Razorbacks would only come to War Memorial once a year, and if I didn't want to travel north, I went south to Pine Bluff.
Okay. Well, okay. Since you asked, I'll just say it. Giovanni Gibson.
Thank you.
Giovanni Gibson is that person. So, like I said, it doesn't matter who the team is. I don't care who the team is. You have to give credit. And I think I told Coach Hampton that last. I was like, you have to give credit to these teams, no matter what. There are still playmakers on every single team.
Could not agree more.
Yeah.
And you made Greg happy. So thank you so much for that.
That doesn't take very much to make this old Marina happy camper, but a UAPB mention was worth it.
Yes. So you mentioned Tariq Cohen, and he had a fantastic, unfortunately injury shortened, but a fantastic career. To me, the other end of it is the aforementioned Marquise Bell, right? How in the heck was he not drafted, right? He has a terrific college career. He's great on tape. He comes in at 6'1" a quarter, 207 pounds, and runs 4.38, right? Like, what more does he have to do to get drafted? I was blown away when he was not drafted, blown away. So my hope is that all the things that you said, Zach, and all the things you said, Ms. Kelly, will be – I'm going to commit myself, and the thing I can do is bother people. So Eric Galco, my friend who's over at the Shrine Bowl, get ready for me to be in your DMs as well. And of course, Mr. Nagy, this is the year of this is time when I bother you. The fact is that, as you said, there's a sort of sense that, well, okay, we got to get 2 D2 guys, 3 FCS guys, and call it good, right? And I shout out to some of the other All-Star games that don't do it that way. They don't sort of just say we've got 5-6 slots for guys that aren't FBS and feeling like they've done their job. The Ali Marpettes of the world and things like that, we don't know how many more there would be if more guys got chances, because who knows what they would do if given the opportunity. So before I let the two of you go, thank you so much once again for your time, your attention, your talents, and you have made me smile on the outside as well as on the inside. I'm going to jump over to Ms. Kelly. So let's talk towards the future, right? Underclass players, people who are still juniors, sophomores, and maybe even freshmen. Give everyone 3, 4, 5, maybe more, depending on how many you have, names to remember for next season and maybe in seasons and beyond, players that you think are on the verge of greatness or maybe already be great, but are going to keep ascending.
Okay, so I don't know if I have 3, 4, 5. That's a lot of guys, and so I don't have a list like Zach. So
we have Zach to do Zach things.
Yeah,
you things.
That's true, but I would have to think about my list that I'm going to keep that's ascending. So let me think about that.
I will jump over to Zach, and then I'll come back to you. And it's always good to think. So I will never be mad at people who like to think. So we've talked about players that are going to hopefully, knock on wood, possibly drafted. But there's some players that, of course, as you mentioned, some of these players will be playing somebody else next year. But at least for the moment, they're HBCU players that you see as ascending and may someday be talked about as players that are, at least if not drafted, or at least are priority undrafted free agents, players that will be stars in the future.
I mean, we just talked about one of them. I mean, Giovanni Gibson is a sophomore, and he's 6'3", and can play out. He can play all 3 positions: a wide receiver from the slot to the X. I mean, and let's just and this isn't a shot at UAPB, but I mean, man, could you, if their offensive line has struggled to protect at times, could you imagine if you gave that offense some time to get him the football? Because there's been plays seen on film where he's had the guy beat, they just weren't able to get him the ball, and he's number 2 nationally in receiving yards. It is going to make a run at maybe 10 touchdowns, because I mean, Alabama A&M secondary has given up some plays, so we'll see there. But I just think with Giovanni Gibson, man, I'm hoping he stays. like you said, and I see everything from him. I've talked to some SWAC coaches, and they're like, he's the best offensive player in the SWAC right now. And that's over Herb, that's over Jacoby, whoever you want to throw in that conversation. They're like, just if we're talking pure talent, it's Giovanni Gibson. And so he has it all. And I think when you look at a 6'3" receiver who probably, depending on where he goes, is going to have at least another 1,000-yard a year, maybe 2, if he doesn't declare early, is a guy that's going to be on draft radars. I think you look at Travis Terrell at Jackson, who is on pace right now to be one of the best kick returners nationally. And I believe he's going to be in conversations for FCS All-American, not just freshman All-American, with his kick return skills. And he's just a versatile weapon. You don't see a lot of athletes that can be used at running back, slot receiver, kick returner, punt returner. He can play everywhere, and he's one of the most dynamic athletes in the SWAC. So I look at him, and just not just, I mean, there's probably too many guys to name, but Alcorn started 3 true freshmen on their offensive line this year. That's unheard of, and they've all played pretty well. So I would say look at that offensive line room at Alcorn as a place you can have some rising stars. I'm just trying to make sure I don't forget anybody. There's just so many different names, but I'll just say this, that those would be my number 1 and 2 is Travis Terrell and Giovanni Gibson. And then, you know, that offensive line unit at Alcorn has really been impressive with all the young talent. And we all know that when you look at that young talent on the offensive line to start as a freshman and have 2, 3, 4 years to develop. That's why South Carolina State's offensive line is so good. And I'll throw in Caden High. Caden High is a young guy too. I talked about him earlier, kind of in the same realm as Giovanni Gibson, not as big, probably more of a slot guy, but it's just an absolute playmaker that can take the top off of a defense. And he's been Eric Phoenix's number 1 target this year. And so I'll be very, very curious to see what he develops into. And let's not forget Walker Harris and Jamari Taylor both have another year of eligibility. So go ahead and let them play in Leone's system next year. They might go from stars to superstars next year with a little bit of comfort with each other and more familiarity with that scheme.
And before I jump back to Miss Kelly, we've mentioned Eric Phoenix a couple times. And I know he doesn't have all the prototypical things that people look for at the position. I'll stick with you for a moment, Zach. Is there an opportunity, even if it's outside the NFL, for Mr. Phoenix to keep playing quarterback?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's a guy, he has a big arm. He's athletic. He's a playmaker and makes really good decisions with the football. I mean, and also, too, let's just put in perspective, there's so many more opportunities now as we have new spring leagues. We know what the CFL is. We know what the USFL is. So I think he can get himself on a roster somewhere. I don't know if he's an NFL guy. I would put him more in the USFL, CFL category, but we've seen a lot of guys his style be really successful in Canada. And so I can see him making his way up there and being a pro at that level.
He can come up and play here up in Edmonton. I live in Calgary, which is really a piss poor football place. It really is. Edmonton is the home of the Elks now. It used to be the Eskimos, and trust me, the Edmonton Elks need a quarterback, and that young man would fit that role very nicely.
Okay. Once again, I just need to make this quick announcement. The thoughts, feelings, expressions, and outbursts that sometimes come from my lovely, lovely friend Greg do not reflect, as a whole, any of the policies, thoughts, feelings.
These are all my views only. Like that school up north.
Team MBS as a whole, which does not necessarily believe or endorse some of those statements. So now you've had a chance to think about some of the young, fresh talent that is on the rise. Who are some of the players that might be freshmen, sophomores, and juniors that you think might continue to be ascending towards greatness? It could be SIAC, could be MEAC, could be CIAA, SWAC, wherever.
So he named one person that I'm absolutely favorable of, and that is Caden High. I am a Caden High fan. To see him actually transfer and go out with, come out with coach there. I am a Caden High fan. Also, taking this over to the D2, over to Miles College, Jeremiah Hudson, which was named Defensive Player of the Week. Very a fan of him. Armon Harris, which is over at Clark Atlanta. I think he's going to continue to ascend and do some great things. And then, of course, I can't leave out my own Jaguar, Kelby Givens, which also was named Defensive Player of the Year. So those are just some of the ones that I think that will continue to do some great things. Of course, there are a lot of others, but those are the four that I would probably say, like right off the top of my head.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. So we're in our last few moments. I'm going to ask you, this is the time where you get to give us all your shameless plugs. What you're working on, where we can find your work, what things are coming up for you in the future, what things you'll be covering that we should follow you to find out more about. I'll start with ladies first. I'll start with Miss Kelly. What are you working on? What's cooking in the pot?
Okay, so what's cooking in the pot? What's coming up next? Okay, so of course next week is Bayou Classic, so I will be in New Orleans for Bayou Classic. What else is cooking? We are working on something big for Celebration Bowl, and that's because I am also with the Black Sports Insider. So we are working on something. Myself and my colleagues, we are working on something for Black Sports Insiders. Actually, all is coming together for Celebration Bowl. A couple of weeks ago, I did do color commentary for the first time. So look for that to come into basketball. Yeah, that was a task, but by God's grace, I got through it. And so, looking at that happening again, coming into basketball, but a lot of different things on the road, traveling. I think I've been traveling since October. I cannot wait till Celebration Bowl gets here. So this is over with, but yeah, so that is, I'm looking to just wrap up this season strong. After Bayou Classic, I'm in Jackson for SWAC championship, and then we'll come back here the following weekend, which is also my birthday weekend, for Celebration Bowl. And so hopefully, just wrapping it up, getting ready to go over into the new year with basketball.
Okay, excellent. Please tell people where they can find all of your wonderful work and where they can follow you on your various socials.
Okay, so of course I'm Black College Experience on everything. I don't think people even know my name sometimes. It's just, oh, hey, you're Black College Experience. They don't even call me Keisha majority of the time. And so I'm Black College Experience on all of my social media platforms, except on X, it's Black College EXP. On TikTok, YouTube, everywhere it is. It's just Black College Experience.
Excellent. And I'm going to jump over to you, my friend Zach. Same question to you. What's cooking in the pot? What is marinating? What are you about to serve up to the people? And of course, after that, tell them where they can find and follow your work.
Yeah, man. Last week of the regular season for FCS, so selection Sunday coming up. So I have a bunch of content on that, the website, podcast, all that kind of stuff. Then the playoffs start, and then obviously covering SWAC championship and that race at the Celebration Bowl between Jackson and Southern to go meet Chinnisberry and South Carolina State. Will probably make my way up to Atlanta, take a break from the playoffs and go cover that. And then I don't know where my schedule takes me, man. I don't even know the bracket yet. We'll figure that out on Sunday. So I'll have to put a tweet out and let y'all know where I wind up. But yeah, you can find me at Zach McKenna on all social medias, at _ Blue Bloods, and then FCS Football Central on si.com/college/FCS. And man, I appreciate you guys for having me again.
Oh, the appreciation flows from us to you. This is one of my favorite times of year, as I said before, and you two are amongst my favorite individuals to discuss something that's incredibly near and dear to my heart, which is HBCU football. Greg, before I bid them adieu, did you have any final things that you wanted to say to these two amazing individuals?
Miss Keisha, you're a Sagittarian like myself?
I am.
See, see, you're really moving up in this world. You are moving on up.
When is your birthday?
Mine is the 5th of December.
Okay. So mine is December 15th, and I have a twin sister. So
there you go. There you go.
So we're getting ready to celebrate our Barack here. We're getting ready to hit 44.
Now, are you the baby twin or are you the older twin?
I'm the baby. I'm 10 minutes younger. I'm the baby of the entire family. So it's 4 girls. It is my poor dad. It was 4 girls, but I am the baby. I'm the last of the line.
You get to name your most famous number 60, and that'll be my birthday on the 5th. Is the 60th. I'm old. I'm telling you.
I'm not too far behind now.
I promise I will bring both of you back. If not together, separately, maybe together though. I like the synergy. Maybe you two should do something together.
Listen, I'm over here trying. I'm like, God, Zach got like names just like flying. I'm like, okay, let me try to go look. He got like names just flying. And I'm like, okay. Whew, yeah.
If you want to bring Zach on, I highly recommend it. I
appreciate y'all.
Yep.
Thank you both.
Got a very long list of names.
Yeah, I just have a Excel sheet with just names. They don't even know if they're real or not. It just random names, just in case.
But it is indeed my pleasure to have you both on. And like I said, this is not the last time. I will have, whether it be separate or together, please return. Zach, I'll have to have you on once the playoffs actually begin. And maybe I'll have to bring Miss Keisha on I'll figure something out. HBCU
Bayou Classic.
Or Bayou Classic. Yes, there we go. Thank you, Zach. That makes sense. So keep a spot available for us right before the Bayou Classic.
Okay, we'll do.
Thank you so much once again, Keisha Kelly, who is if you care anything about HBCU sports, not just football, you've got to be following her. What are you doing with your life? Get right. The year's almost over. Fix this now if you're not following her. And Zach McKinnell, if you're not following him and the Blue Bloods, once again, I don't know what to tell you, right? I mean, fat meat is greasy, right? You never get involved in fighting a land war in Asia, and please make sure you're following these two amazing individuals. Get on it now. What are you doing? I'll give you permission, even if you need to like take your phone out, right? You can turn away for a moment and there, boom, click. Now you're following them. You're welcome. Once again, it is my honor, my privilege, and my pleasure to thank you so much for what you've done for us here tonight. I promise, once again, that I will be bothering you again very, very soon. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your evening, both.
You too.
Take care.
Oh my gosh, Greg, we had maybe our best show ever. I don't know. I have to think about it. This was very good. This is good stuff.
It is very highly rated.
Yes. Well, as well it should be. I guess we should talk about the other games being played by non-HBCU teams really briefly before we close out. As you mentioned, Army is really in the game of its season. Now, I know you aren't giving Army any sort of chance. And I won't go so far as to predict an upset, but I'm telling you this game will be closer than people think.
I don't think that line is legitimate that they're giving out right now. I said to you earlier this year that both Army and Navy could upset the Fighting Irish. However, the way that this Fighting Irish defense is playing right now, I just don't see it happening. It will be a closer game than what people think, though.
It will be a closer game than people think. That's what I'm saying. And obviously, an Army win means big.
Whoa!
That means field. To me, that means field of 12. Like I can't think of a logical explanation for how you somehow twist.
Unless they lose to Tulane in their championship game.
Oh, right. That's how
they have to play that championship game.
Right. You're right. If that happens, then I would like to see one of them make it. I love both programs for different reasons. Obviously, despite that I used to get tired of, the old saying was, you'll never have to ask someone if they went to West Point, right? You'll never have to ask that. Trust me, they'll let you know. But we made that joke. I'm an ROTC guy from Norfolk State, so whenever I run one of the what we call ring knockers, right? That was what we used to call the guys from the point. But I would love to see one of them make it, and obviously my preference, given a choice, would be the Army. But this is their whole season in terms of the Big 12. When I say the Big 12, not the conference, but making it into the field of 12 is winning this game. And for me, it comes down to this: for them to win this game, one is Notre Dame has to turn the ball over. That's very simple, right? If Notre Dame turns the ball 2 or fewer times, they probably can't win this game. But 3 or more, they're in the fight, and then they have to not turn the ball over.
And it depends on what part of the field Notre Dame has those turnovers in as well. I mean, if it's
Also,
deep,
yeah.
if it's deep in Army's territory, well, then you got to try and face Mr. Cross and Riley and all those guys up front, and then you got to try and get something past Gray and Leonard Moore in that secondary. And I told you when Leonard Moore came in to replace Benjamin Morrison that this kid was good, and he has been phenomenal.
Yes. Yeah. Good might not be quite a strong enough term. I'm going to mention a couple other games that this is sort of also trap game season a little bit. Now, I think Miami is now fully awake. So had they managed to somehow wriggle off the hook last week, I think Wake Forest might have been laying in wait, but Georgia Tech already took care of that. Illinois should be careful against Rutgers. And Florida is not good, and Ole Miss is good. But this is another game just feels like if Ole Miss gets to a slow start, if Florida finds some success, it could end up being a dangerous game. If not a full-on loss, they could end up struggling with a down Florida. SMU, if they continue to win, has a shot at also making it to the round of 12 if they run the table from this point forward. Virginia is not a great program either, but they're exactly the team that upsets somebody every year. You don't want it to be you. Georgia has a semi-bye week against UMass. There's not really much to see there. And UTEP Tennessee should not be particularly compelling. However, a game that has my full and complete attention, two games, in fact, that have my full and complete attention. One is Kansas, Colorado. I mean, that has all the trappings of a trap game, my friend.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Kansas last week came out and they beat BYU and they beat them soundly. That was not a lucky break that Kansas got in that game. They played so much better than BYU did all game long, even though the score was a very close game. But Kansas did beat BYU. And this is in Lawrence. This isn't going to be in the Mile High country. This is going to be in Lawrence. And you look at Kansas's record this year. They've lost those close games early on, but now they're winning. And Jalen Daniels has just been playing phenomenal football lately. So we'll see what happens in this one.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this game. That the two ones that I have really circled in terms of the trappiest of the trap games. Trap. And then Minnesota, Penn State. Now, Penn State just has to have a clean run the rest of the way. And they're obviously very much in. I mean, but if you want to get kicked out, a good way to do it is lose to Minnesota. This would make Minnesota's season in essence, and you just got to not let that happen. And this is not at all a trap game because these two teams are actually fairly evenly matched. You just mentioned BYU. No rest for the weary because they now have to go face Arizona State, which is on the outside looking in, obviously. But if they can win the conference championship, which they have to beat by BYU to do, this could be – this is, once again, both these teams are sort of on the outside looking in. BYU is closer to being on the inside. If they win this game, this helps them to be in position to get back, into the 12. Arizona State, this is it, right? This is their best last chance. Yeah, their best last chance. Kentucky is just tough enough to deny Texas style points, probably. Texas should definitely win that game, but I urge that they not take Kentucky, but I'm sure they won't. Don't take Kentucky lightly. They play very hard. They're another tough physical team that just doesn't have quite enough talent in certain positions to win.
Ask the Georgia Bulldogs how tough Kentucky can be.
Right, but ask Georgia, exactly. They're no fun to play against. No. Boise State just has to hold serve against Wyoming. Wyoming is another team that's sort of undermanned, but
Boise State currently would be the 4th ranked team. They would be a guaranteed team at this point, according to this week's power rankings at the ESPN level. There, they have put Boise State into the 4.
Right, but they still have to avoid losing.
They still have to beat Wyoming, and then they have to win their final game as well, and the conference championship.
Right. Utah, Iowa State. Utah maybe has righted the ship. I mean, I don't want to predict what Utah is or isn't. But Iowa State, riding high early in the season has, obviously taken a few bumps, but they need to not take Utah lightly because Utah plays hard, plays tough, even when they are a little bit decimated by a variety of things.
Just go back to 2 weeks when they played the Holy War and how close they made it with BYU.
Right, with a much superior BYU team, they scared the living pants out of them. Now, in Pac-2, we have Washington State versus Oregon State for, I guess, the de facto Big Two championship game almost. So if Washington State holds serve, though it won't get them, there's nothing they can do to get them into the Big 12. I mean, the Big 12 meaning the round of 12, the group of 12 for the playoffs. Still, it gives them bragging rights in the Pac-2, and Texas A&M, the old Texas A&M would lose this game, right? The Jimbo Fisher version of Texas A&M, if they were ranked like around this where they're ranked now, last year or was it? Yeah, year before last, I can almost guarantee that they would lose this game.
Yep.
Right? Auburn's not all that good. Texas A&M looks better. Blah blah blah. Boom! They lose that game by 2 touchdowns. Right? I mean, it's almost like clockwork. They've dropped that game in the past. And Oklahoma, if you're looking for one last thing to be proud about before this season sort of peters out at the end, beat Alabama, and hey, all of a sudden things look different for the season. Now that's very unlikely to happen, but
very unlikely
to happen. Oklahoma has struggled mightily for a bunch of different reasons this season. But if they wanted to, quote unquote, save the season, this would be a way to do it. I don't see that happening. I think they'll be lucky to keep it within 3 scores. But there is the opportunity, once again, to say to the world, we're not patsies. We're still a proud program. Any other things you want to say before we close out, Greg?
Well, Ohio State Buckeyes are gonna face the Indiana Hoosiers, who are coming off of their bye week.
Yes,
and Curtis Signetti now has that 8-year, $9 million season contract, and he's staying put with Indiana. They put money into the program as well, and all that good sort of stuff. So the Indiana Hoosiers are not just a basketball school any longer.
Nope.
And last year, a much less talented Indiana team took Ohio State to the mat. I mean, they took that very good Ohio State Buckeyes team last year, and they took them right to the mat. I'm not going to be too shocked if Ohio State barely beats Indiana, and I won't be shocked at all if Indiana actually beats Ohio State either. I will not be shocked.
One tiny little bit. The world is still not willing to take Indiana seriously. It's still shocking to me. I'm not suggesting anyone ever listens to the Paul Feinbaum show for any reason ever, but when you hear the way they talk about Indiana, it makes you feel like, well, one, they only watch SEC football. I guess that's part of it. But if you drop Indiana in the SEC, they're no worse than third. I'm sorry, SEC fans. They're no worse than third.
They are such a sound football team.
Yep.
And they are second in the country against the run.
Yep. Correct.
So Ohio State has Judkins and Henderson in that backfield. You better not think you're going to be running the football on that team. And then the secondary guys they've been stout as well. So you've got Sims and Igbuka and Mr. Tate. You're going to be in for a fight.
It's good, right? Exactly. Here and once again, at the college level, pass interference is just 15 yards. I mean, I'm not saying I'm telling my defensive backs if you think you might be able to give ability to just grab them, but you might remind them that it's just 15 yards in college. To me, Ohio State has the big advantage is big plays. If you can deny Ohio State the chance to create and execute big plays, 20, 30, 40-yard plays, this is going to be a dogfight. There's going to be a tough game. The only way to me Ohio State runs away with this is they get a bunch of big plays, boom, shots down the field. Deny them that, which they have thus far denied pretty much everybody else. That means that now they got to play your kind of football, right? Make them play your game. If Indiana makes them play their game, to me, the one thing I'm worried about with Ohio State, and we talked about when Josh Keatley was on, is they've shuffled around some pieces on that offensive line, and it's been
they've had no choice, but with the Simmons injury, they've had no choice, right?
Correct.
Donovan Jackson's out playing left tackle.
Yep.
And I mean, he did a fantastic job against Abdul Carter of Penn State that day, but Indiana's defensive line is just as solid as the Penn State. And if they attack the other side of that, the right tackle side, which, by the way, teams are not paying attention to the right tackle position for the draft either. Do you guys notice where TJ Watt lines up, where Aiden Hutchinson lines up? Yep. They're always coming after that right tackle. You gotta be smarter about your positioning here, because some of these edge guys are no longer coming after the left tackles.
Right.
Correct. Right. And this year's actual tackle class, I have more right tackles that are coming out this year. They're going to be in demand, because you look at these right tackles in the NFL these days, and they're getting pounded by TJ Watt and Hutchinson for his injury and things like that. Right. So the days of being a dominant left tackle are still going to be required, but your right tackle position, boy, it needs to be improved.
Right. And the teams know this, right? Teams know that if you only have one legitimate offensive tackle, they're going to go after the other guy. So here's what right thing. I give people say puncher's chance. I give Indiana a puncher's chance because of Ohio State's offensive line situation. And if they are blitzing, not a lot, but at the right time, right? Well-timed blitzes that are smartly and strategically implemented. And that, once again, that's how you get those turnovers, right? Strip sack.
But that's by causing pressure on Will Howard, not getting a quarterback sack, kids. It's not just about a quarterback sack. The quarterback sack only came into the NFL in 1982.
Well, as a statistic, right?
As a stat. Right. Because Harvey Martin in 14 games has the record of 23, not Michael Strahan with his 22 and a half in 16 games.
Correct.
But again, Mr. Martin was not included because the stat was not counted by the NFL.
And crazily, not in the Hall of Fame. But once again, that's a whole other,
whole
other show. But that's why I give them, quote unquote, a puncher's chance. And if Indiana is able to get their run game going, and then they get a couple of shots of their own off play action, I won't be shocked at all if they manage to eke out a close victory down, probably very late. Like this game will be, I think, a back and forth affair. And once again, the one caveat being if they give up deep shots to Ohio State. If Ohio State is able to get off big plays, I think Indiana then is forced to get out of their character, and then, things can go badly for them at that point forward. But
and all of those SEC school teams, the Ole Miss and the Alabamas and the Georgias, they're all headed for a playoff game up north. Do you see the weather at Notre Dame Stadium today with 5 inches of snow?
Yes.
Oh, Alabama, you're going to come up there and get your butts kicked. I love it. This is why I wanted the playoff games to actually not be centered at the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl and all that nonsense. I want these teams from down south to have to come up north and play where the men play. Not down in the bayou and all that other fun stuff. You're going to come up north.
Yeah, well, November football, especially November and December football outdoors, is certainly something special. And of course, I'm excited about anything and everything. But once again, to everybody who's watched, everyone who's subscribed, everyone who has commented, thank you so much for paying attention to what we do, because I would do it if nobody watched, I'll be honest. But I'm glad that somebody does, because it makes it even better. And it puts pressure on me to try to keep improving. Anything else you want to say before we put this baby to bed?
Tomorrow night, I will be with Mr. Jeff Barnes on The Last Word. He will be at the Florida Classic tomorrow.
Ooh.
Yes.
Well, I may have to join you.
Bethune Cookman, he's going to be at that game. So yes, he will be there, and I will be most excited to say that the Hoosiers have beaten the Buckeyes. It would just thrill me to no end to be able to say that. And
That would be
then your playoff picture drastically changes.
yes, correct, drastically. Well, once again, I want to thank the guests that stayed with us and played with us and made this show so great. Zach McKennell from the Blue Bloods and the amazing, incredible, and extremely knowledgeable Keisha J. Kelly of Black College Football Experience. We thank you from the very, very, very deepest and most sincere parts of our hearts. Greg, we will do this again in 1 week, my friend.
Sounds good, Bill.